down. We're delighted you're here this morning. We're going to get started because we have a large panel. One we're waiting on one person to come, but we have a good-sized panel. We want to hear from them, and we want to have a time for discussion. So we're going to begin, as we always do, with going around the room so that everyone can know who is here. I'd like you to identify yourself if you're an organization or if you're a citizen of which community, because we represent 3 communities: Larchmont Village, Mamaroneck Village, and the town of Mamaroneck. I'm Elaine Shapnick, president of the local summit, and now we're going to start it around.
Nina Rescue-Cuddy with the summit.
Jeffrey Weiner, member of the summit.
John Gitlitz, Summit, HRC.
Yeah,
Andrea Kostas, Human Development Services with Westchester, which is the Mamaroneck agency for housing development.
Louise Michelle, summit and immigration.
Teddy Becker, Summit, at home on the South, friends of the library. Judy Myers, Westchester County Legislator, hi Rose, and longtime Summit member.
Kay Francis Richards, Mamaroneck Larchmont Human Rights Committee, the Summit Board, and the Washington Housing Alliance Board.
Judy Garbrock, summit and cancer support.
Al Shaker, Summit.
that goes with it.
Susan Riley, Mamaroneck Public Library Director.
Bob Hayden, Summit, and at home in the Sound. John Bradley, at home on the Sound and Summit.
Ditto, Emmy Lou Sleeper.
Laura Stanleyton Report.
Iris Freed, Hope Community Center.
Selwyn Freed, Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Good morning, Keith Eisen, Mamaroneck Public Schools, Summit Board.
Judy Rosner, Eye Care Committee.
Lynn Reichgott, president at Home on the Sound and Board of PAP and Summit.
Ken McAndrews, Mayor, Village of Larchmont.
Jane Eny, Councilwoman, Town of Mamaroneck.
Richard Allen, I'm the pastor at Mamaroneck United Methodist Church. I'm standing because I'm going to have a shameless invitation here. This Thursday night, June the 21st, 7:30 at my church, that's the Mamaroneck Church, on East Boston Post Road. Amy Jill Levine, Professor Amy Jill Levine, Professor of New Testament and Jewish Studies at Vanderbilt University Divinity School, and a New Testament scholar and a Jewish person is going to be with us. As she's a great lecturer. She sold out at the 92nd Street Y. There was less than standing room. So we've got 400 seats. We'd be delighted to have you. It's a warm day. Bring your bottle of water and join us 7:30 this Thursday night.
Hi, Sabrina Fiddleman, Summit and Hunger Task Force.
Good morning, Stephen Bartell, incoming president of Rotary Club of Larchmont.
Good morning, Shirley Hilton, from Mamaroneck Village.
Directly to
Sorry about that.
turn.
Yes. Good morning again. Shirley Hilton. How you doing?
Jeremy Ken Query, nice to meet you.
Harold Wilson, Local Summit.
Fran Snedeker, Village of Larchmont.
Welcome to the summit. Thank you.
Elizabeth Steiner, Summit.
Welcome to
Katie Olive, Furniture Share House.
Linda Lehman, Larchmont Mamaroneck Hunger Task Force.
Abby Katz, Councilwoman, Town of Mamaroneck.
Hi, Nancy Seligson, Supervisor, Town of Mamaroneck.
Slight change just in the order of speaking. And
Thanks very much.
You're in
We're in
perfect
order.
Mary B. Barrett with please add this.
Very good.
Please, if you haven't, be responsible and also for
purposes, it's very helpful to us. Give us your email if you're new. I work with the Summit, I work with the Women's Club.
Emotional
and the
item.
Interfaith.
Thank you very much.
I would have
Never have too
announced
many
that if you
pens.
hadn't, Richard. It's so important to us this Thursday night. So it's great. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. This recession, we know that public services to those in need have been diminished. What we need to also look at is those services have also been re-examined by the nonprofit sector, which also has been affected by the recession. Today, we're going to look at how that effect, what that effect has been on particular nonprofits, those that deal with affordable housing, how they responded to these diminished resources, and how they're rethinking their mission, and how they accomplish that mission, more importantly, has affected those in need in our community. I'm going to turn the program over to Nina. Nina Cutter.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you for coming. We have four wonderful panelists who will present a little bit different about each of their organizations. Caroline Silverstone, we all know, is one of ours from Mamaroneck, former town supervisor, former town councilwoman. I think Caroline's been living here for
45 years.
45 years, yeah. And she's also the president of iCare. And I think we have a lot to learn about what's happening to iCare. Ken Creary will speak second. He's the president of SHORE, which I love the acronym. Sheltering the Homeless is Our Responsibility. I think it's great. And he's formerly with IBM. I believe you served 2 terms. This is your second term as president of SHORE.
At least.
At least, yes. And SHORE
only
will
2?
explain the housing that SHORE is taking care of and how they manage it. We all know Jeremy, who's been president at many of our breakfasts. And Jeremy is the president of, the executive director of Washingtonville Housing Alliance. And prior to that, I believe you were the executive director of a housing organization in Vermont.
Correct, yeah.
And he comes to us today to tell us about what's going on with the Washingtonville Housing Alliance. And finally, we have Rose Noonan. And Rose Noonan is the executive director of the Housing Action Council, which is a not-for-profit organization that provides technical assistance to many of the organizations represented here and others within the county. And Rose will be able to give us an overview of what's going on countywide in terms of the effect and the effect that the economy is having on those who provide the kind of services for dealing with affordable housing. So I think we're really lucky to have them all in our community and really lucky to have them here this morning. So I will start with Caroline, and we'll have everybody will have about 8 minutes to speak, and we hope by doing that we may have some question and answer afterwards. So welcome and thank you.
Sounds like it, yep.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. You know, recently I had occasion to sit down with a group of women who were 40, 45 years old, in that range, and I discovered that they had never heard of the Larchmont Motel. And they did not know that we had a homeless crisis now in Westchester, or ever had one. And I saw it and I thought, all my life, I mean, for the last 20 years, I've been working on an issue which the newest generation of Larchmont people is totally unaware of. And how do you catch people up to that? How do you make them aware? So let me review for you a little bit the fact that 25 years ago, the Larchmont Motel, which sat right in front of the Hummocks School in the space now occupied by the Hummocks Park Apartments, was used by the County of Westchester to house homeless people. And they were housed on a per diem basis. The county was paying $60 per day to house whole families in individual rooms of the motel. And it was temporary housing, but many families were there for well over 6 months. So it was an enormous amount of money that the county was paying out. And a group of people in the community began looking for permanent housing for these people. And they began, finding housing and getting them moved out. But the minute we emptied one motel room, the county would fill it up with another family. So it was kind of endless, and we began to realize that there had to be a better way to deal with the housing crisis in Westchester. The year at that time was about 1985, I guess, because when I became town supervisor in 1991, we had already condemned the motel property under the direction of Dolores Battaglia at that time, who then left office when I took over. We had condemned the motel, it had been torn down, and we were beginning to make plans for a housing development there. A development of affordable housing, which we were calling workforce housing, because we said we wanted to be able to house our own teachers and firemen and other volunteers and the guys who plow your streets and so on. The housing went up. It was amazing. I guess we were all in such shock of having had that motel in our midst for so long that everyone accepted the idea of affordable housing there, when in fact affordable housing was kind of a bad thing to say. I was told when I ran for office never to say affordable housing, that it would kill my chances of being elected. So, but anyway, I think I said it anyway, and I still got elected. So after that was built, Dolores Battaglia, who couldn't get over feeling that we ought to be doing more, had the idea of starting a small community group, which she named I CARE, and that's an acronym too. It stands for Interfaith Council for Affordable Residence. A group of her friends and acquaintances put together a large pot of money. There were several contributions of $10,000 apiece. And they bought the house on Woodland Avenue in Larchmont. It's a two-family house, and they began housing homeless families there on a shelter basis. So we were getting the shelter rate of reimbursement for housing those people of $60 a day, which was more than enough to rehab the house and also to accumulate some money for the second purchase. So over the ensuing years, I CARE bought three two-family houses scattered around the community, two in Mamaroneck Village and the one in Larchmont. And in addition to that, we worked in coordination with Washingtonville Housing to build three more two-family structures, which we co-own at the present time. And so altogether, I CARE houses 12 families and has over the years. Well, the last house we bought was the one up in Mamaroneck on Franklin Avenue, which cost, I believe, $350,000. Well, even at $350,000, it was something we really couldn't afford. But as you all know, the housing prices have gone through the roof since then, and even with this most recent recession and the fallback of prices, there's still nothing affordable to buy anymore. In fact, the formula that we have used over the years of having the combination of the Section 8 subsidy, which pays for 2/3 of a person's rent, and the individual pays 1/3 of their income toward their rent. That combination is no longer enough to cover the mortgages on the property and the taxes, the property taxes, which we pay. Fortunately, in very recent times, a law has been passed which permits us to declare these houses to be forever affordable, or for 50 years, which is pretty close to forever. And in so doing, we are able to apply to have the taxes based on the income of the property, which is, cuts the taxes considerably. So while we have started that process, it hasn't gone into effect yet, and I must credit Jeremy from Washingtonville for informing us of the possibility of getting that break. In the last year, Washingtonville Housing has been managing our 3 independently owned properties, and that has been very successful. They've done a lot of good work on our properties, and things are looking very well. But one thing and another, we have now developed a relationship with the Shore Group, which is another affordable housing group, and it, as a matter of fact, was the model on which Dolores Battaglia, it was the model Dolores used to set up iCare, a group of interfaith people all working to bring affordable housing to our community. And I think probably my time is up, and it's time for me to turn it over to Ken, who will talk to you about Shore.
Thank you, Caroline. It's really fascinating to me how similar the organizations are, not only in what we do, but in terms of our history. Shore, which, as Nina mentioned, stands for Sheltering the Homeless is Our Responsibility, was begun in the winter of 1985. It was a particularly cold winter. A lot of people were homeless on the streets of White Plains, and a group of individuals decided it's time we did something to help these folks. And working through houses of worship, they established a rotating shelter system for these individuals who were homeless on the streets in the city of White Plains. So they would rotate from one temple to a church to a synagogue, and each house of worship took its turn for a week. Out of that effort, the Open Arms Shelter, which is a men's shelter in White Plains, was started and is continuing to operate today. A few years after that, these same individuals who were continuing with that program also recognized that there's a need for permanent housing for people who are in the shelter system. And that was when Shore actually was started, which was about 1989. And what this group did is they incorporated as a not-for-profit and purchased a 2-family home in White Plains, renovated it, and rented it to 2 families who were currently resident in the shelter system in the county. And one of those families is actually still in that house today, and that was 25 years ago, I think, something like that. So the idea of permanent housing, it was the concept, get people out of the shelter system, give them a stable environment in which they can live and raise their families, send the kids to school, continue to focus on the basics in life, with shelter not being denied, and having a permanent place to live. So that was the concept. And since then, Shore has established several different, there are 2 basic models that Shore has implemented. One is the first one, which was to acquire, renovate, or build a new 2-family home. The second was Shore's largest project, which was in 2000, I think it was started, which is a combination of affordable housing as well as the rental program. What we did was we built 7 units of 2-family homes, one of which was sold to a first-time home buyer at an affordable housing rate, and the second unit in the second apartment in the unit is then rented to a formerly homeless family. So we have 7 units of affordable housing, 7 units of rental properties that Shore is actually the tenant of record, and we then rent to the families. As Caroline did mention, our rental income is very similar to what you described. We try to make it so that nobody pays more than 30% of their their income. If you think about it, that's a big chunk in any case. The average rental for a 2-bedroom apartment in Westchester is about $1,580 a month. 30% of your income to make that kind of a payment would mean you'd have to make $63,000 a year. Very few of the families in the shelter system have that kind of income. So the gap between what we can actually get for rental and the amount that we are actually paying to operate the properties is significant. So SHORE, as an all-volunteer, there are no paid members of SHORE. SHORE is an all-volunteer organization. We do contract out services through the Housing Action Council as well as other social services organizations. Our 2 largest programs are the Permanent Housing Program, in which we build and provide permanent homes for families in the shelter system, and the Family and Support Services that we provide. We contract out to social services workers to provide counseling and other assistance to our families. We are currently working hand in hand with iCare now to merge the 2 organizations because we have such a synergy. We're seeing that given the economic climate, a lot of not-for-profit organizations have contracted. Several in this space have actually gone out of the business. SHORE actually took over a property for an organization in Tarrytown that actually had to close their doors, and we're now operating that building, and we'll soon have the acquisition of that property completed. But when we heard that iCare wanted to either divest or sell properties, we said, well, it makes sense to keep that mission alive. iCare is a wonderful organization. Perhaps by joining forces, we'll increase our strength and we won't lose that energy, that base of caring community members, and continue the mission. And so that's what we're working on. I think we will be hopefully completing that process towards the end of the summer. We are having SHORE has an annual midsummer dinner, which is coming up in July 18th, where we will be celebrating the merger of the 2 organizations. And you're all welcome to join. We have invitations. We'd love to see you there. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer more questions afterwards. I think I'm probably out of time at this point. So Jeremy?
Thank you, Ken. So I will start by saying that I was happily at SHORE's.
Yes.
I was. That's why I'm not standing. I was happily at SHORE's dinner. I don't know, 4 years ago, where a whole group of us affordable housing people bought a table, and we bid on one of their prize items, which is Lois Bronze's famous Louisiana gumbo, served at your house with Lois and Chuck in attendance. So just for that, I urge you all to go to the dinner and bid on Lois and Chuck. It's an experience not to be missed. As Carolyn mentioned, we were have been managing SHORE's, iCare's 3 properties this year, and we looked very hard at could Washingtonville and iCare merge. And this caused me to think about not-for-profits and why we do this not-for-profit thing, because it's a big blob, the not-for-profit sector. The leadership conference, which is held every year, had 300 not-for-profits represented. It's 18% of the employment in Westchester County is not-for-profits, and its payroll is up in the billions. And it's a sector that over the last 10 years is professionalizing. And it's sort of moved over 20 years from being completely mission-driven people who just wanted to do something in society and accumulated an organization around them, and they wake up one day and they find they have a large organization and have to put organization under the organization. And now it's becoming very professional, a career, field where people can go in with degrees, specialist degrees, career track, salaries that are things you can live on. But listening to Shore and iCare talk, there's also, I realized there's a fun, and I got Shore's mission statement, which is an absolutely unconditional commitment to providing housing for the homeless. And I said, yeah, there's a fundamental difference between Washingtonville as an affordable housing organization that manages properties and does eviction prevention, and an organization that is just, we are committed to housing the homeless. That it's mission driven. So I thought about different categories of not-for-profits. One, I don't like the term not-for-profit. I prefer running a business that provides a public good. We get a tax benefit. We don't pay taxes, which is a great advantage. Maybe it's a 10%, 15%, 20% advantage in exchange for providing a public good. Some of us, hospitals are a good example, and I think some affordable houses just look like commercial businesses. We have a large payroll, we have a large capital base, we purchase, we have complicated balance sheets, but we provide a social good, and those parts of the not-for-profit sector can be very hard-nosed. There's another whole chunk that are really subcontractors to the government for executing large programs. Some of my affordable housing colleagues fall into that range, where, and you see this in New York City, multi-million dollar contracts are given out each year, and the organization rolls those out. And then you have $100 million not-for-profit, but it's really a subcontractor to the government to accomplish specialized services. There's another group that are mission-driven. I'm going to look at Kate. I'm going to look squarely at Kate. Mission-driven that raise funds to fulfill the mission, and I think Shore falls and iCare fall into this. They have an absolute commitment to a mission, and you raise funds to provide furniture, to house the homeless. And then there's a fourth group that have the endowment, the classic charity, that have 100 million, or I heard yesterday 5 billion sitting in the bank and have to meet their charitable requirements. So Washingtonville primarily falls into the running a business for the public good category. With a mission of providing affordable housing. So out of our $1 million budget, about 100,000 is really mission related. Outreach, eviction prevention, advocacy, foreclosure prevention, first-time home buy. It's terribly important work, but it consumes one person out of 5. Because the large flywheel of our business is running a portfolio of 40 houses that we'd like to see, 40 units, not houses, that we'd like to see grow bigger. So in terms of this question, how have we responded in our mission to the funding crisis? First we started out in 3 years ago by looking at our mission. It's really rather clunky. I refer to it as an old Chevrolet. It's clunky, rather ugly, reliable, and gets us there. And it says that we create affordable housing, we renovate neighborhoods, and we do other things to support a community that is multi-age, multi-income, and diverse. And you try, and there's no poetry in this mission statement. It's on the bottom of our email, but it's what we do. So we reaffirmed it and said, yeah, it's what we do. Within that, we try and run the highest quality affordable housing portfolio. We try and create affordable housing envy. And this is beginning to resonate around the world, that when you go buy an affordable housing project, you should say, I wish I didn't make so much money so I could live there. Boy, that's a nice building. What do I have to do to live there? Well, you have to stop dissing all the people who live in affordable housing. Say, that's my brother, mother, sister, aunt, nurse's aide, teacher's aide, police officer, carer, and anyone else, groundskeeper at my golf course, keep on going, and you also have to thank the Lord that you're still making good money because you could be there tomorrow, and you have to be glad that there are organizations that create those houses. So we went into the recession, we cut costs brutally, we took 25% out of our administrative budget, which is what runs our office. The properties run on their own, but we took, I don't know, 10 or 15% out of the costs of our properties. We've cut energy costs brutally. And we've pumped more money out of our properties, and that kept us afloat through this recession by cutting. We cut maintenance costs. We actually poured money in. We had, when I took over, we had money in the bank, and we had a flood. Anyone remember the flood of '07? We had to renovate 5 apartments completely because of the flood, and that kind of got us going. So, okay, why stop here? So by now we've renovated 15, I think, and we have a couple to go. And that's lowered our maintenance cost, and so we're taking more cash out of the buildings. We'd like to put it in the bank to build reserves for future long-term repairs, but just through this recession we've stolen every penny that we could. So the good news is we're beginning to turn the corner. As you know, I went off to Kenya in February and looked at houses built out of mud, and I came back, and whether it was because I went away for a month or because of new energy, but we're beginning to put new projects on the drawing board, which is very exciting. So I'm hopeful that we're coming out of this extraordinarily difficult period. So the village has just announced a transit-oriented development grant to look at the half-mile area around the railroad station and look at the zoning in that area and look at what needs to be done to rethink the zoning to facilitate the development of what happens when you go under the railroad bridge and go north. It's a big contrast between Mamaroneck Avenue up to the bridge and then, oh, what happened? It sort of all stops. And if you really look, you see there's some quite derelict buildings and neglect and stuff. So that's a very interesting grant, and Washingtonville Housing Alliance has a piece of it to organize the community outreach and community meetings. We're working with another community organization that has to remain nameless on a possible site acquisition that would lead to a rehab of a commercial building. And any one of these could not happen, but that's very interesting, and it's the result of 5 years of talking to a potential partner, and eventually you come on something that might work. We're looking at one of these streets in the Washingtonville area with a complete new streetscape. There's a couple of derelict buildings, and we've commissioned a new streetscape of what this whole street would look like if it was redeveloped. And we're taking that out to major developers to see if we can get enough interest to raise the initial, $2 million to get going, and then 10 to do the job. And everything we do in Washingtonville is we end up financing hugely complicated financing deals, putting together. It's just as hard to put together a $2 million deal as a $200 million deal, except you don't have enough money to put it together. It's easier to do $200 million. And then we're looking at consolidation and simplification, and the hope in starting to talk to iCare was that we'd eliminate one little sub-unit of buildings that we operate 50-50 with iCare, with its own set of bank accounts and its own set of books. And so overall we're looking at how we simplify, because we're operating on, I don't know, I think it's 3 less people than in 2004. I don't know how my predecessors did it, but they had 8, I have 5. So that's the world we operate in. We have to be efficient, lean, and flexible, and try and keep on going.
Jeremy? I forgot to mention that in the process of going forward with the merger with Shore, we expect to cede to Washingtonville our half of the 3 co-owned buildings which were put together, it's probably 15 years ago at least. So that will be a way of simplifying the whole transfer.
which is fantastic.
Rose, I think it's yours now.
Well, thank you for having me today, and it's so nice to see some faces that I've worked with over the years. As Nina said, I'm with the Housing Action Council. Our office is based in Tarrytown, but because of the nature of the work of working with so many nonprofits and for-profit developers in affordable housing, I do come from a perspective of on a countywide basis. I wasn't sure what role I would be playing here. I thought I might be an introduction, but I was told maybe I could be the grand slam. So I think I'm just going to say what I intended to say, and you decide where it fits, okay? I want to go back to what Ken had mentioned in terms of what the average rent for a two-bedroom apartment is in this county. And in the Mamaroneck Larchmont area, it's slightly higher. He mentioned it was $1,580 for a two-bedroom apartment, and that's confirmed by a lot of the literature that we read in terms of from a national literature, local literature. Ken said that you need an income of about $63,000 if you assume you're spending 30% of your income toward housing costs. But taking it down to what the housing wage would be. What do you need to earn on an hourly basis in order to afford that average rent? And that's about $30 an hour. I would venture to say that most of the nonprofits that I assist families who have substantially less income than that. Most of the families, and Housing Action Council, helps to manage Shores properties. Most of those tenants have incomes between $15,000 and $25,000, and they're working. Not all, but a high percentage of them. And I would think if I looked at Andrea here from Human Development Services, that you would agree that many of your clients fall within that range or even lower. So in terms of a need in the county, my understanding of the need from direct experience is for housing that houses families with incomes under $30,000. There's a need for housing for higher income people than that. But in terms of what, in my opinion, what is not being addressed effectively is those with incomes at less. And there's many reasons for that. Let me just touch on homeless numbers from a needs perspective. The latest numbers from the County Department of Social Services, and these are, it's a point in time number, so it's January 31st of this year. They report 1,741 persons who are homeless in this county. Right? Now, it might change February 1st, but it's not going to change to 500. Right? Wish it would, but it isn't. Where are those families? Those families are in transitional housing, in domestic violence shelters, in open arms shelter, again, which Ken mentioned, which Sure helped start. There are families in emergency housing apartments who can stay there for a period of time, but need then to move into permanent housing. Who are the people that fit into those income categories who have incomes under $30,000? There are families without jobs, but there are also people who are living in very overcrowded situations throughout Westchester and in deteriorated housing. They are your school cafeteria workers, your home health aides, they're your child care workers, they're your receptionist who works in your local doctor's or dental office. They're the ones, along with the rest of us, who serve the communities and others here. Who has responded over the years to those who are the neediest? It's been the not-for-profits. There's for-profits that work in the affordable housing area, but traditionally it's the nonprofits that have and continue to respond to those who have the greatest need, housing need. So I look back I'm not going to say how long I've been around, but I've been around about as long as you, Caroline. Not as long, shorter than you, Jeremy. Shorter than you, Ken. But I've been
I've
around.
only been in affordable housing for 10 years.
Yeah. So I said, okay, let me think of the organizations that dealt with developing and managing housing. Now that's a specific focus. So years ago, I thought about Yonkers, and I said, okay, stop wasting abandoned properties. REAPS, which is a community land trust, and CURE. Okay, 3 local organizations. One is struggling to survive. The other 2 have, let's say, bit the dust. On a more regional basis, I look at SHORE and A-Home. A-Home serves the northern part of the county. 2 different models in terms. SHORE is an all-volunteer organization that contracts for administrative services with Housing Action Council. A-Home is a staffed organization that also works closely with other organizations like ourselves to develop and manage housing. And then, in terms of local organizations, you heard of what Jeremy is doing in Washingtonville Housing. I'm so glad to hear that you're actively looking to do more development. But I also then look at the Preservation Company in Peekskill. And their mission was to develop housing for the neediest. They haven't developed housing in about 10 years now. They are providing other services, home ownership counseling, foreclosure counseling, tenant eviction, but have not been able to move forward with providing more housing. Croton Housing Network, a local organization that has developed probably about 55 units of housing and has decided to pull back and strengthen their management capacity rather than looking at new opportunities. Hastings-on-Hudson, voluntary organization, they keep going. Small project after small project. Human Development Services has changed over the year. At one time, HDSW was based in Portchester. And for a variety of reasons, then merged with another organization, which Andrea heads as Human Development Services of Westchester, and is now a countywide organization, but focuses in on for housing activities and housing rehabilitation activities in Portchester. To my knowledge, HDSW, for purposes of Portchester, has not done development in quite a few years. Right? So I've seen a change. I'd say every organization, I think I've covered most of the organizations. I say that they all are struggling in one way or the other with tired staff and boards. Maybe we should all go to Kenya with you and reinvigorate ourselves. Sounds good to me. All are faced with funding cutbacks in different areas. Development is more difficult to do than it used to be in terms of costs are higher, government programs are more complex, and a variety of other reasons. Tremendously large subsidies are needed to develop housing. So to be able to develop the housing that SHORE and I care in terms of reaching the very low, you need a lot more subsidies than the for-profit developers are giving, because you've got to bring those rents down so low so that people in the 15,000, the 20,000 can afford them. And the recession. So what do we need? What I am a believer is in persistence. You never keep up. There's a job to be done. You don't stop until it's done. So I should keep myself busy, for all of us, for a long time. I do think we need to reinvigorate staffs and boards. We need new people. We need older people who have been on the board to continue to be on the board and feel reinvigorated. We need partnerships and mergers with others when it makes sense. I need advocacy for those who are in greatest need. One of our parts of our business, and I'll call ourselves a business also, is that we are marketing, qualifying many of the families and individuals who are applying for affordable housing. And we're finding that for every 1 applicant, for every 10 applicants that applies, from an income perspective, only 1 can afford the rents that are in the affordable housing developments, because there's so many families and individuals in this county that have so low incomes. We should constantly look for development opportunities. As you can hear, Jeremy is surely doing that. I do think that the nonprofits should continue to focus on small-scale projects. I think those are workable. They work within communities, and the types of developments that most of the nonprofits have done fall within that categories. I also think that it's so important as we talk about mergers and creating larger organizations, not to forget the importance of community and how important the community ties are to the nonprofits in order to do what they do so well, to get support for the development of housing, to get funding and other things. And that everything that we do, we need to remain flexible. And we need to create a sustainable model for scattered site rental housing. Why are for-profit developers not involved in small-scale projects? Because it's economically difficult. And it's economically difficult to do scattered site rental. And so I think we all need to think about that and how we can make the model better than it is. So with that, I hope I've given you some thoughts and tried to tie together some of our remarks here. But thank you.
I want to thank all the panelists and now open the floor up to questions.
Thank you very much for that excellent presentation. And seeing that the 4 of you advocate for affordable housing, do you think that your language of affordable housing is the same of that of our county executive when he's in Washington, D.C.?
He wants to tackle that.
I don't know who wants to field that, but
We have a very, very effective and smooth-talking county executive who has an agenda, and I leave it to people in the room to decide what his agenda is. He inherited the affordable housing lawsuit, which obliged the county to create 750 units of affordable housing in those communities that have done nothing to support what is called the Berenson decision, which demands that every community bear its share of regional housing and bear its share of housing for those people who live and work in the community. My understanding is that he's approaching this 750 in the most business-like way, which is what is the minimum number of units we can create in the minimum number of places to have this done in the minimum number of time, and then check that box. But what you have to be aware of is the county had a larger goal for 20 years, which is that the county had a deficiency of 10,000 units of affordable housing to meet the affordable housing need. It's possible that 10,000 is a number that needs to be revised in light of the recession, the collapse of the housing market, but even if it were 5,000, because you can now go out and buy one family in Mamaroneck for $230,000. I know one that exchanged hands recently. But even if it's 5,000, the deficiency, that number has managed to be shuffled completely off the political agenda. It is a masterpiece of political maneuvering to make the whole debate about 750 and the unreasonableness of the feds and lose sight of a major goal around housing equity in Westchester County, and also to manage not to focus the debate on why are people in Pound Ridge or Bedford even asking the question, what is it about a monochrome, mono-income community that is attractive to their kid to raise their kids in? what kind of world do they expect their kids to live in? Are they going to go and marry someone from the horse farm and then live forever in that bubble?
I have a question. I work for Hope Community Services in New Rochelle. And to hear what you're talking about, housing is far from what we face. We have shape-up people who are homeless, and they stay at a shelter. We have a shelter there called Oasis. Unfortunately, they can't get into Oasis until 9 o'clock, and they're out at 6 o'clock in the morning. When I talked to none of these people, I said, well, where do you go? They said, well, we go to the cemetery, because that's where the police don't bother us. Now, is there any kind of, in Mamaroneck and Rye, any place for these people? Is there a shelter? No? Is there a need for a shelter in this area? What? You have people that shape up there. Where do they go at night? Where do they sleep?
My understanding is if you're homeless in Mamaroneck, you either sleep under a bridge, and we have some people sleeping under the bridges, or you go to the shelters in White Plains. But people don't like to go into the shelter system. So I think, Rose, you probably have a better fix on this.
And I just have to echo what Jeremy said. There are 24-hour shelters available if the individual or family agrees to engage in the services that are provided by the shelter. But as you described in New Rochelle, the same situation is in White Plains, where there is the 24-hour program which Open Arms, sponsored by Grace Church Community Center, that Ken talked about. But there are rules and regulations to come into those shelters, and if you choose not to, not making a judgmental comment about that, you can do a drop-in center and then move on. And so those individuals, it's usually individuals who are living where they can before they're moved on by the enforcement agencies.
Just want to add, the couch surfing component of homelessness is very important to consider. A large number of people couch surf for long periods.
Hi, I'm Nancy Seligson, supervisor of the town of Mamaroneck, and we met with Rose Noonan several months ago because as one of the 31 targeted communities in the federal consent order, eligible, excuse me, I always say targeted. It feels targeted. Thanks, Judy. We are very interested in the town of Mamaroneck in creating fair and affordable housing. And I have asked my planning board, zoning board, board of architectural review to have their eyes peeled in our community and look and see if there's any sites that we could possibly turn into fair and affordable housing or renovate into fair and affordable housing. It's really tough in our community. We are a built-out community. The few buildings that seem to lend themselves to that idea already have that component of people living there, and so they aren't eligible for the housing subsidies or benefits that the county is offering at this time. I just wanted to get up and tell everyone that it is something we're very, very interested in the town of Mamaroneck, that we're constantly looking at and working on. We're looking at changing our zoning to accommodate more housing, to allow for it. And I'm asking all of you that in the town of Mamaroneck, if you see sites or have some ideas or want to share some possibilities with me, we are really open to it.
Can I just comment on that? It is definitely difficult to find those properties, and what Shore's experience has been is working with the local communities and the local governments. We are able to come up with solutions. For example, our last development was in Ardsley, We worked with the town of Greenburgh, the village of Ardsley, to acquire, an abandoned property that was in foreclosure because of non-payment of taxes. We worked the deal through the town and the village to acquire that property, and we built a nice two-family home there. So working with local governments and the communities, we are able to do that, but it is very difficult work. It takes a lot of work to do that.
Hi, Ernie Odiorna. I'm one of the council people in the town of Mamaroneck. Having grown up in the Bronx in the first 15 years or so of my life as a tenant in a private home, eventually there was a second tenant. So there were 3 families living in a home, comfortably, clean, neat, safe. I'm thinking all of the very large homes that we have in Mamaroneck and Larchmont could easily be, if the owner was willing, and perhaps there are many senior owners of the homes whose kids are now gone to college, or wherever they've gone, they've moved away. They're rattling around in these big houses. If we can come up with some secure, intelligent renovation that meets the various needs of the homeowner and the tenant, we have a whole chunk of potential housing right here without enormous expenditure. I know it costs a lot to renovate, but you could add a bathroom, you could add a kitchen, and it'd be a lot less than buying and building from scratch a new home. We should give some thought to where that could fit in, and maybe it would make sense.
Just to speak to that, there is a zoning problem with that, where the zoning only allows single-family occupancy and creation of an accessory apartment with bathroom is strictly forbidden in many of our elegant residential neighborhoods. To cite the state of Vermont, which I do more often than not, the state of Vermont passed a law mandating the right of homeowners to have an accessory apartment of not more than a third of the floor space by right. And that was fought by a few communities, but eventually went through. And if you did that, the number of affordable apartments you would create in Westchester at a stroke of a pen, you would also radically change the character of our neighborhoods. But it's a very, I think it's one of those solutions that municipalities really need to look at, perhaps on a limited basis, not on the full territory of the town of Mamaroneck, but within a certain more densely populated center. What would happen if?
I was wondering if Ann McAndrews can talk to the progress on the affordable housing project in Larchmont. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, as most of you know, there is a large project about to begin in the village of Mamaroneck.
Larchmont.
That wasn't even and what it is about 50 units. And the site is up behind, let's call it the Guitar Center on Palmer Avenue. And that area owned by the Collins brothers that has been used for years as sort of a truck depot and dumping ground, dumping lots of stuff we've discovered. It's going to be sold by the private developer, whose name is Esposito, so we call it the Esposito project. Mr. Esposito came before the village to start this 2-apartment project in the early 2000s. And he got all the necessary permits from the village, from planning and from zoning and from architectural review. And we put him through quite a process. As he was going to begin, the economy tanked. So he had ownership of property, or he was under a contract to buy it once he got the permit. It all got very complicated. And then the financing fell. So when the county settlement occurred, note the verb, occurred, there was a project sitting ready to go. And so it became part of the county settlement procedures. What we are waiting for now is a final sale between Mr. Esposito and the developer. And the developer's name is Bolger. And that is supposed to happen sometime this summer. And then construction will begin of about 50 units, most of them 1 and 2 bedrooms, a couple of 3. As part of that number, there are going to be about 5 that are, left over from a legacy project that the village of Larchmont participated with the county for the financing of the Flint Park project. And so those 5 are going to be under a separate regime of, a separate set of protocols for who gets in those apartments. The others are going to be ownership. The participants have to qualify for a mortgage in several steps. The first, as Rose Noonan knows so well, is that the income limitation is going to be for a family of 4, it's going to be about $84,000, $85,000 a year. And that being 80% of the average income in the county. So you start with that. You have that income limitation. And then you have to qualify for mortgages. You have to qualify for one mortgage that's under a consortium of banks that will be available. So how do you start this project? After advertising in certain test markets, and with the understanding that that doesn't limit anybody from applying to get into the lottery. There will be a lottery. And once it's discovered that you're qualified under the income limitations, then if you're number 1, you then have to be able to qualify under the mortgage. And if you don't, then it goes down to number 2 under the lottery, number 3, and number 4, and number 5. And that's the way it's going to be done. Now let's say you have a family of 4 and you're making $84,000 a year, and you qualify and you eventually buy the apartment, and then you start making more money. Well, you stay. We aren't forcing anybody out. And that's basically what's going to be happening in the next few years in the village of Larchmont. And we're looking forward to it. And I think I'm going to ask everybody's help as this eventually develops in making this the best affordable housing project in Westchester.
Yes.
I think we have time for one more.
I'd like to make a comment about existing housing and whether it is, considered substandard. I happen to know of a person who's living in an apartment. It's not classified as affordable, but it's something this person can afford. And the roof leaks and, so on and so forth, and they are afraid to say anything to the landlord because if they do, they're afraid the rent would go up and then they wouldn't be able to live there. What kind of protections are there for residents in Mamaroneck, Larchmont, wherever, to help protect them when they have to deal with a landlord, or how can they say something to get their property brought up to a livable standard without losing the chance to live there?
This is the tenant advocacy piece of the work we do, eviction prevention and tenant advocacy. So the rights the tenant has in law are very different from the rights they're able to exercise. In law, they're allowed to escrow their rent and give the landlord notice that until the property is remedied, they will put their rent into escrow. Good luck. And which is, jump to the end, which is why having an NC in town that is committed to providing a core of really top quality apartments is really important. We took one tenant who'd lived with this situation for 20 years. So it depends on the landlord. You know, there are resources out there. Unfortunately, many of them have been soaked up. One of the contradictory effects of the settlement is the funds that used to be available for the communities that did the most effective work for affordable housing have all been diverted to the settlement communities. But you know, there are landlord programs to assist a landlord in renovating their building. But someone has to come. There has to be a willing person. So you can try and do a mediation. You know, I haven't seen the worst landlords where you file your complaint and the landlord starts roof repair in winter, takes the roof off the building and leaves you on the ground floor. That only I saw in England. But you know, it's a dirty business if you're only in it for milking the building for as much cash as it can generate. So there's no cut and dried answer. Rose, you have a better answer?
I think that particular tenant is putting themselves in danger by not telling the landlord about the situation. Because if you look at the law, you look at leases, there's a responsibility on the tenant to advise the landlord of any repairs that are needed. That's his or her responsibility. So I wouldn't encourage the person to remain silent. Otherwise, there's a basis for the landlord to evict the tenant. Yeah, but again, I agree with Jeremy. There's no easy answer. I think organizations like Washingtonville Housing Alliance and others that intervene in these type of situations that try to help landlords, tenants mediate their problems is probably the best approach.
I want to take. I just want to thank our panelists for really an informative and interesting presentation. It was great. So thank everybody for attending and asking good questions. And I guess our next meeting, I don't know when it is.
We take a break for the summer, and we'll be back the third Tuesday in September.
Have a good summer.
Oh, I talked to you.
Sure.
So what happens to these people?